He's a hero that's protecting in every panel. Here's a look at McFarlane Toys, DC Direct. This is the Superman 1978 comic-inspired Superman. From the doomed planet of Krypton, two parents launch a spaceship carrying their infant son to Earth. Here he grows up to be Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. I think just before we look at the boy in blue, well, and a little bit of black, let's take, though, the tape measure and see how tall the DC Direct Page Puncher's Superman stands. Even though it's DC Direct, it seems to be using a lot of the same body, obviously, as they already looked at Superman 78 Superman that we've already gotten from Todd and his team. Because of that as well, the figure's going to stand about the same. The figure's at about 7¼ inches in height, or about 19 centimeters tall. Thank you to everybody, by the way, that has been watching my Christopher Reeve Superman reviews. This would now be the third time we've looked at this mold. The first time, obviously, would have been this mold of Superman, where he had the colors, the primary colors of the blue, the red, and the yellow. We then jumped over Superman 2 and went directly to Superman 3, where he battled himself. Going now more the darker route of the colors and getting a grumpier expression that happened to be borrowed over from the head that we got with this figure as well. Now, I didn't get the chance to do this with either one of the reviews booked in on either side of Supes in the middle. I did want to bring in the one that we got from NECA Toys. Now, this was one of the first time we got ourselves a Christopher Reeve, although, to be fair, he's a much smaller scale Reeve, and we're going to kind of get closer looks to the face in a moment. This figure also got the body borrowed over. Not the same head sculpt, though, but NECA did double dip to this mold again, as he got released in a 2-pack along with boxing great Muhammad Ali. So what does come with this Christopher Reeve? Well, more about the same. The figure, first of all, does come included with a display stand, although both cases of Christopher Reeve up to this point have come included with flight stands, so I guess we're doing things a little bit differently this time around. Still has the DC logo branded down below. Still has, of course, the neighboring peg that can plug into either one of Superman's boots. The figure does also come included with a trading card. I was a little disappointed right away getting this out of the packaging that the trading card they taped down. I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to ruin the card when I try to peel away the tape. I've already successfully peeled the tape at the bottom of this. I just wanted to show you guys the top. Even though they had adhered this to the plastic clamshell, you can see, though, that the tape is very easy to remove. This little mark, by the way, though, was me. I tried to actually cut the tape along the top, and I nicked it with my knife. So even though the Scotch tape didn't damage the card, this guy certainly did. This, by the way, though, is going to be pulled from the comic I just have over here. I should really have been grabbing that as well. And then on the back of this, it gives us sort of, again, a generic read-up for the 1978 Superman film starring Christopher Reeve. It's a good enough read-up. I don't expect them to do anything differently here. In fact, if you look at the original Christopher Reeve Superman, this also pulls it from the movie. This would have pulled it from the comic. The back, though, of the read-ups are seeming to be exactly the same. What's, though, interesting is that the font on the DC Direct Page Puncher Superman has the font smaller. I don't really know why it had to be smaller. I'm sure, even if they made it the same size font, what font size is that? Is that 11? 10? I don't know. That looks like it's probably like 8. Who really cares? I think, though, what I care about it, though, is if they made the font a little bit bigger, they could have just printed the exact same way, and it would have just gone to right around here. Does anybody really even... No, okay, nobody cares about that. But that's the two different kinds of cards that we get here. I'm going to kind of hold on to this card for at least right now. I did also want to bring in the comic that also comes included with the Superman. Superman 78 ties in, at least from the sense that, of course, we got all the same characters from the original trilogy, I guess the quadrilogy. Yeah, I mean, like Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor really isn't in the third one, although, again, like the benefit of Superman in the third one is at least he bows himself. But we enter into this Brainiac, and I think that's really cool. It's actually a 1 of 6 issue run, although the only one that we're getting here is issue number 1. Connects, of course, also to the original Origins. Marlon Brando appears only, I believe, in the first couple of pages, and he spends just as much time in the comics as he does in the movie, and he probably got paid, he got paid big bucks for that. Then we got a jump right away to Brainiac, who sees the exploding planet of Krypton. Then we jump right away to Clark Kent. Well, I don't want to spoil this for anybody that wants to look at this. The thing that I like about this, though, is that they're choosing the design of the superpowers Brainiac. I hope we get this figure. Now, we've already gotten a Brainiac from the Ghosts of Krypton. We also got as well I think a regular Brainiac. Was it the Brainiac? I'm trying to think of which Brainiac it was. Anyways, I've done reviews of all of them. It was like, I think the Injustice Brainiac, if memory serves me correctly. Todd and his team, I certainly hope, does at some point release the superpowers version of Brainiac. It's one of my favorite designs of the character. Anyways, though, I don't want to obviously give anything away for the issue. I will put the comic aside, though, and certainly would recommend that you guys read it if you get the chance. As for the things that he does come include with accessory-wise, if you're familiar with all the hands and all the other bells and whistles that came included with both of the figures before, then there's nothing really new here to report. The figure already has a couple of gestured hands on the ends of his forearms. He does also have a couple of gripping hands. I did make this mistake, by the way, when we looked at the Superman 3, or the variant, 1978 Christopher Reeve, that it said he was strangling Clark Kent, and he was the one that was throwing the tires. Actually, it was the other way around. Clark Kent was throwing the tires at Superman. Anyways, though, we got ourselves the strangling hands. Not that they're really strangling hands. Got a couple of flight hands there as well. We got some closed fists. Closed fists are good. Yeah, they are. And we also got ourselves a pointing hand. Now, I did say in the review that it was kind of like the pointing hand that, when Superman kind of does that thing where he's like, yeah, I understand what's going on. I got you. Somebody had also made mention that maybe this is the pointing hand that's going to come more so for a tease. I think they've actually teased a Kryptonian setup where Superman's going to be in front of that. Maybe that's going to be a good hand for that as well. And of course, we always need to have ourselves the tried and true information crystal that Superman does use. One thing, though, to note, though, because this is a comic version of Superman, the Kryptonian crystal is actually painted in opaque green plastic, or it's actually painted all, as opposed to using the clear plastic or translucent plastic that you would have used for the original Kryptonian crystal. So if you don't like necessarily the Kryptonian crystal in translucent green plastic, you can definitely use the one with the painted green instead. All these hands, by the way, can easily be swapped out. So like he already has, again, like a relaxed hand on one side. Just go ahead and remove that. I say easy, but watch me struggle with this. Go ahead and just remove the hand from the peg. There we go. I don't know why I was having such a hard time doing that. And what do we want to use for a hand? Want to use a closed fist? All right, we'll use a closed fist. This is more or less just to show you guys how easy it would be to change out the hands. The first couple of times, I have actually changed this hand more so than this hand here. So that might be one of the reasons why I was having a harder time. But basically, the hands unpeg and peg back in place somewhat easy. As for the actual body of Superman, the one that we can probably borrow the most over from is the original one. Obviously, what they have done differently is the colors, well, still being somewhat of the same, a shade of blue. Obviously, one of the things that they've now added is shadowing on the side of his body. The head sculpts, from what I can see at least, seem to be identical. Although, looking at it, it almost does look like Superman has a slightly smaller face. I think it's probably just more my eyes playing tricks on me. But you can see he's got the shadow all along the bottom of his chin. He's got panel lining there across the neck there as well. And he's got all this nice little panel lining that they've all done down the side of his body. The thing that's kind of interesting, though, about it, and oh, by the way, he seems to have the exact same cape. I don't think they've changed the coloring of the fabric at all, and both of them do have a wire built into them. The thing I want to, though, bring to your attention is the size of the pegs that they're using for his arms. I don't know why, though, they chose to use a different length peg, because if you look at the original Superman, and then you look at the one that we get from the page punchers, it would have been so easy, I think, just to use the exact same arms, but they're using longer-looking pegs. I mean, certainly when it comes to bending this guy, if you bend him, you can get a double hinge on his elbow. I know we already kind of talked about that in his review. If we look at this figure, he does also still get the double bend in his elbow. I'm not sure why he has this much longer when really the original Superman, just extending out his arm again, why the original Superman, he had a much smaller length peg and it worked perfectly fine. Really weird observation here. Also, one of the things, obviously, I can observe, too, is the fact that he's got some dark coloring there on the inside of his bicep, running down the interior of his torso. He's also got on this side as well. I mean, if we were to kind of look at this, I mean, which way is the light really hitting this? This side? I mean, like, he's casting a shadow on this side. Maybe it's kind of hitting from, I guess, the top. Is that right? Because we're looking at it like that. The sun's hitting from the top. It's getting the shadow on the side. Does anybody really care? Okay, nobody cares. The Superman emblem still seems to be the same. The thing that's kind of also interesting about this, too, is if you look at the emblem here was actually raised to the point where you can actually peel this off his torso. I wouldn't recommend it, by the way. Don't peel it off his torso, whatever you do. The thing that's interesting, though, about this is that this one doesn't have it. I could do this until the cows come home. This emblem is actually printed onto his chest. I don't know why, again. Maybe just because, again, it would be a lot easier just to print this onto his chest instead of actually having to tool a second piece, even though the other one already did that. The underoos, again, have the dark colors there, the shadow added in there. You've got some shade added on the insides of his thighs, some panel lining there to the side of his knee. Just, again, like, The thing I really like about this, though, is that, well, if you already were a big fan of the original Christopher Reeve mold that you used, or that obviously McFarlane Toys used, I mean, this one borrows over a lot of that, but it just kind of gives us more like what Superman would look like if he was actually in the comics. For, again, like the head sculpt, it loses a little bit of some of the realism that goes along with it, because also they have to paint it a little bit differently as well. But yeah, I actually still like this. I think they've done a nice job. Now, okay, so I'm going to put this guy down here for a second, because again, one thing I did want to kind of rectify here in this review, hold this Superman here. I did also want to bring in the NECA Toys one so you guys could see the differences there. I don't even know if somebody actually asked me this in the comments section. Could you compare it along with the Christopher Reeve from NECA? But did want to show you guys, though, the difference, now that we're actually looking at this figure the third time. Body-wise, this is a little leaner. He has, obviously, the longer emblem there. The thing that kind of always really bothered me about the NECA one was that they added these line marks in his chest. This one had a much smoother body. Not that the review is at all for the NECA one. If you guys also want to see that in a separate review, let me know down below in the comment section. But like, this articulation is also going to be the same carried over articulation for the DC Direct Page Punchers release. Sliding everything out of the way. So the head sculpt, first of all, is going to be on a ball joint. It allows the head to rotate all the way around. The head can look up about that high. And I feel like, I'm just going to, again, put this guy down. I keep picking him up, putting him down, picking him up, putting him down. I feel like with this one, he had a slightly higher head reach. Is that right? Yeah, it doesn't look like his head can really go as high up as the original Reeve Superman. Maybe has a little bit of extra bulk. I guess he really would, because also the cape is tucked in on this side. They had to kind of develop a whole new neck appliance for this piece of Superman. So maybe that have also made him a little bit thicker here, where he has a little less mileage when it comes to rotating his head. The head does look down, by the way, about that far. You can rock it back and forth as well, and yes, you can rotate all the way around. Superman's arms do rotate all the way around. You can get a full T-pose going. Nope, no issues there at all. There's a swivel there at the bicep. Double hinge, even though, again, like, it's a weird looking joint that they're now using for this figure release. He does have a double point joint in the elbow, although it's a little harder at times to bend. Hands, of course, rotate all the way around. You can hinge them back and forth. Upper torso ball joint. Lower abdomen ball joint. Legs do split out. There's the ratcheted joints working behind the scenes. Hard-working guys, hard-working fellas. The legs go forward, the legs go back. There's a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Only just a little bit, though. Double hinge on the knee. There is no articulation, again, for the boots. The boot is just a continued sculpt from the rest of his calf. And then finally, you got the articulation here in the ankle, an ankle rocker. And yes, this version of Superman, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, does have toe articulation as well. May not be everyone's cup of tea, but one thing I do really like about the Superman is, for the most part, yeah, he is using pretty much the same Superman that we had already gotten before. One thing that's also actually rather interesting about this, I don't want to say like it's a carbon copy, same to same, apples to apples, Kryptonian to Kryptonian. There were, again, some other changes that were made to the Superman. Like, more importantly, obviously, is where they placed the cape. The cape is now wider, though, on Superman. That wasn't the case before. Something also, too, I did want to mention as well. If you look at Superman's sleeves don't have that one thing that also really bothered me about the Reeve Superman. He's got that little ledge, that little bracelet piece that's sculpted into the end of his forearm. The version of the DC Direct one, even though, again, for the most part, using, I would imagine, this same body, more than anything than not, this actually does have just a more seamless sleeve. So again, like, it's strange that they've made some allowances when it comes to just this figure, that it's not exactly a carbon copy, 100% carbon copy of Superman. Of course, then there's the evil Superman from Superman 3. Nice looking figure. It doesn't have a flight stand. It does have a display stand. It doesn't have a flight stand. But what it does have, at least instead, is a little bit of reading that you can do when you're actually, once you get the figure out of the packaging and you put this on display. I like the fact that we actually get ourselves a comic. But I do hope, though, that this isn't just going to be making an appearance in the comic, that we are at some point going to be getting ourselves a Superpowers Brainiac. Oh, let that be something that's going to be on Todd's wish list. It certainly is on mine. Care to step outside, General? Actually, no, wait, no, it's Brainiac. Brainiac not only gets an introduction in the comic that comes included with the Page Puncher Superman, but also that the Brainiac is tying back into the Superpowers design of him. Man, oh man, I would love to see them release a Superpowers Brainiac. The only Brainiac I think we've gotten in that design that wasn't made by Kenner was that back in the day, Mattel did a DC Multiverse, or it was, I think back in the day it was like DC Universe Classics Brainiac. Very limited on articulation, but one that I wish I still had in my collection. This, though, Superman does take a lot of the borrowed over ideas from the original Christopher Reeve and the Platinum Edition that we've already had a look at. One, though, can't help but notice that they have clearly made some changes. The neck collar being the biggest one, because of course, he's got a wider neck now showing. The cape isn't so much tucked into the side of his uniform or his suit. Whether it's actually done instead, they've tucked it underneath his neck. Now that may make some a little bit more limitations when it comes to moving his head around. You can't seem to get his head to look up as high as the original OG Christopher Reeve that we've already had a look at before. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this figure is that his forearms are completely changed. They've done away with, first of all, the bracelet part that was a part of that sculpt that was at the end of his forearm, but also that they've used visibly larger pegs, hinge joints to connect the elbows to the biceps. I'm not sure why they decided to change and use different arms than the original two Superman that we've already had a look at. You would think, though, it would just have been such an easier thing just to use mold to mold, like to like, Kryptonian to Kryptonian. Yet, though, this figure does have some notable changes made to him. In the end, though, what do you guys think of the Christopher Reeve here, the DC Direct comic tie-in Superman? One to pick up or one to pass? Let me know what you guys think of it down below in the comments section. If you guys did also enjoy this video, you can do it a solid and, of course, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I certainly hope so. You can hit that subscribe, you can turn on that bell, and of course you can always come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.